All right, there we go. Hello everyone, how's it going? Team here, and this is BxJS Weekly, episode 120. And for whatever reason, we have even less news today, I think. This is getting smaller and smaller. I guess people are too preoccupied with the pandemic to actually produce any JavaScript content, and I can't really blame them. But yeah, we do have some pretty cool stuff today, so let's get cracking. As usual, the first section of the week is getting started. We got 3 articles here today. First one being building a GraphQL API in JavaScript from Heroku. Hey Marina, welcome to the stream. Alright, so yes, building GraphQL API in JavaScript. This is a pretty nice introduction to GraphQL APIs. What is GraphQL? How does it actually work? How do you build a very basic one, and what are the good and not so good use cases for it? So if you are curious about the GraphQL and you wanted to get started, this is a pretty good starting point. Although it is a very low level one, so it doesn't rely on any frameworks such as Apollo or anything. So it shows you how to do it on a very low level, which is nice to know. But if you build a real API, you basically want to use something a bit higher level to simplify things for yourself. Hey Bachamir, welcome to the stream. Alright, next article we got here is how to replicate the Zelda Breath of the Wild interface with React, Tailwind and Framer-motion. This is a 3-part article. There is currently only part 1 as far as I understand. But it is a pretty nice idea, basically. If you never played Zelda Breath of the Wild, it has a pretty nice UI with some pretty fancy effects. And this article goes on to replicate those effects and behavior using the React Framer-motion, the animation framework, and the Tailwind for styling that. That's a pretty cool, outlines pretty nicely onto how exactly do you start approaching a task like this, shows you how do you design the layout, how do you figure out the grid, how do you figure out the items, the flow of things, the animations, and so on and so forth. So if you are getting into the UI design, if you're getting into the UI building, I guess, do check this one out. It's actually a really good tutorial. And if that looks interesting, keep an eye on the upcoming parts that would basically handle the animations and model windows and stuff like this, including sounds, which is kind of nice. All right, and the last article we got here for today in the Getting Started section is ECMAScript proposal, private static methods and accessors in classes. So this is a nice introduction to the proposal that I don't think I've actually heard about that proposal before. So this is, yeah, we already had the public class fields and private class fields, and this is private static methods and accessors, which, is a nice feature to have. And I think anyone who works with object-oriented programming kind of expects to have those, and JavaScript did not have them up until now. I don't know what the proposal is at which stage it is right now, probably something like stage 1 or 2. Is there a link actually to the proposal itself? Static class features. So, okay, so it's a larger proposal. I see. And it's stage 3 already. Okay, interesting. Comes together with a static public field, static private methods, and private fields. Somehow completely went by me. Maybe I just don't remember that. But there you go. It's a pretty nice introduction to it. It's pretty cool. So there you go. Right. That's it for getting started. Now we got articles and news. We got 4 of them here today. The first one being how to build an automated DIY irrigation system controlled by an app. Yep. Somebody built an irrigation system that is controlled by essentially a React frontend. And it is really cool. So if you are into home gardening and you wanted to automatically irrigate your plants, apparently it's not even that hard to do. Like, there's a full-on tutorial here. There's explanation of what parts do you need, what kind of hardware you have to buy, what is the software architecture here with, the React server and Node.js backend that basically handles stuff, and MongoDB is a database that stores the intermediate values. It's really straightforward, but it's really, really cool. So, yeah, and there's some 3D printed boxes for that to make it a bit nicer. And the code is all on the GitHub. So if you are interested in topics like this, I would absolutely recommend looking through all of that and looking at the project and maybe even building it yourself, because it seems like a very nice project. And I really surprised that, you know, it is that easy to do something like this in 2020. Like, there's literally sensors that you can just buy and plug into the soil to get the moisture measurements, which is just crazy. Raspberry Pi, I believe it is, yes, it is Raspberry Pi, and the sensors are probably on standalone microcontrollers. Yeah, there you go. So the ESP8266 microcontrollers. But anyway, you know, it's like the again, it's crazy how simple it is to do something like that. So if you're interested in details, do check out the article. It is pretty damn cool. Continuing, we got an article from the Slack engineering team titled The App Sandbox that talks about a new feature that was shipped in Electron and sandboxing the code to basically safeguard from running untrusted things or accessing untrusted things from your Electron app. And, you know, I never thought about it this way, but when you start considering loading third-party data from the local hard drive or from remote stuff or whatever, it kind of opens up a lot of possibilities to inject things in there, right? And when you're on the web, you don't really care too much about that because the browsers basically got you covered. But once you start thinking about the Electron, it's a lot less restricted, right? And, well, I mean, with a purpose, obviously. But it does bring a lot more complexity and requires a lot more work to make it secure. And this is exactly what the article talks about. So they did things like hijacking the window desktop API and overriding the functions in preload script so that anyone who tries to access them won't be able to do anything. And it's like window open is now window open blank instead of a, you know, real function. It is just crazy. And yeah, so there's a bit more details on how exactly that works, what is the problem, and then they're talking about the context isolation, the new context breach API that's been recently added to Electron. How does it work, and how do they actually utilize it to make the Slack desktop app based on Electron more secure, which is, again, pretty cool. So, like, I did not know about that API. Admittedly, I haven't worked with Electron in a couple of years, I guess, but it's pretty cool to see stuff like this. So if you are working on the Electron stuff or planning to work on it and are worried about security, do check this out. There's some really cool stuff in here. Right, next article we got here is from NPM blog. It is titled NPM version 7 series, why keep package-lock.json. This talks about the package-lock, or log files, I guess, in general, and the fact that NPM version 7 will support both yarn lock and package.json lock, and why did they decide to keep package.json lock in addition to yarn lock. And there's basically explanation of how exactly the two log files are different. Yarn lock is plain, if you didn't know that, so like it doesn't contain the tree structure, just lists the dependencies with the specific versions, while the package-lock.json actually lists the tree structure, well, kinda tree structure, and then there's whole difference with nesting and deduplication, the way they work, and the difference on how the yarn and npm handle the user intent. So basically it comes down to the thing when you write the code and you require something in your project without the library being listed in direct dependencies, right? Yarn just locks it down to whatever was the version that was in subtree. And npm considers it slightly differently. I also read that pnpm, for example, will just straight up tell you that, hey, I can't run this because it's not in dependency, so I'm gonna error out of this, which actually sounds like a really nice approach. So like failing, I'm a huge fan of failing quickly if there's something that is even remotely could be wrong, right? But yeah, so if you're interested in more details, do check it out. There's some pretty interesting thoughts in here. I would want to see the final, version and see how it works, because it's like I switched back to Yarn again because npm 6 had some problems with dependency installing for me, so there was some non-deterministic stuff going on that I did not like. Yarn is just way more straightforward, I guess, and did not have that many troubles. So I'm curious to see if the npm 7 will improve that. I mean, it should, right? Because they've rewritten the whole damn resolution algorithm, so that should be better. But I'm kind of be curious to see how exactly will that differ from the v6 when we actually get our hands on it. But again, if you're interested in the differences, if you're interested in the log resolution, the log files and all that kind of stuff, do check this article out. It is pretty damn good. All right, the last article we got here for today is refactoring optional chaining into a large code base, lessons learned. So as you know, optional chaining is now supported everywhere basically. So you can use it in Node, you can use it in all the browsers. Okay, all the evergreen browsers, let's put it this way. But the cool thing is that even Safari now supports it, which is great. And there's no reason not to use it because it is a pretty damn fantastic API and it will save you a lot of time and will make your code a lot nicer and easier to read. But it comes with some caveats, right? So you have to keep some things in mind. And this article essentially talks about, so first of all, it introduces what the optional chaining is, how do you use it with the nullish coalescing operator and stuff like this. How do you check the arrays? How do you match the regular expressions and stuff? And then it talks about things that, well, are essentially caveats or things you have to keep in mind. Like, for example, I never actually thought about the fact that, you know, there might be a way to assign stuff that doesn't exist because this doesn't make sense to me. So like well, how would that work if there is nothing on the left? Like if this returns undefined, what would this be assigned to? I don't know. You know, just from the logical perspective, basically. But the author tried doing that, and obviously that didn't work and failed. But, you know, you can still use the if with a nicer expression to check that before assigning things. Again, it seems like a nice syntax, but I have no idea how that will work logically and if that even makes any sense. But anyway, so it's like one of those things you cannot assign to the optionally chained operators. The other thing is that you have to chain correct things, right? So in this case, there's an example with the check for the item with specific index, and where he rewrites it as a check for the children array, but not the index itself, which obviously fails if the index doesn't exist. So if you try to access the element of undefined, it will just throw an error. So you need additional check. This is something to keep in mind. It might not be as obvious at first, but you know, it's just test your stuff. Be sure you have tests. Another less obvious thing that I found interesting is the difference between null and undefined. So this is again something that you typically want to sort of unify in your code base. Checks like foo and foo.bar, right? So if foo is null, you will get null as a result of that. But if you chain it, if foo is null, you will get undefined because it cannot access .bar from it, right? Which means that your checks have to account for the value being either null or undefined, and you cannot just check for null, for example. But it's like, you know, it's just like those tiny things that you have to keep in mind. And yeah, there's a bunch of other things that you have to keep in mind, including return statements and things like this. Cool thing is that, as he mentions, there's quite a few instances where optional chaining actually helps you catch bugs early and fix them early, because that happened to me as well. There was like a few places where I was like, why did I do it this way? But yeah, it's pretty nice. So if you're interested in optional chaining and interested to read about the caveats and things to keep in mind when rewriting a large code base to it, do check out the article. It is pretty good. Hey Marco, welcome to the stream. Right, that's it for the articles and news, just 4 of them today. Now we're coming to the tips, tricks, and bit-sized awesomeness. So the first thing we got here is Compiler, a Twitch series about working on a JavaScript engine. So this is a new Twitch/YouTube/livestream series from the Mozilla folks that will be focusing on working on JavaScript specification, ECMA 262, and the way those are implemented in SpiderMonkey, which is the JS engine inside of Firefox. So if you're curious to see how the Firefox folks work on the SpiderMonkey and how they approach debugging, fixing bugs, adding new features, this is an amazing opportunity. So all the videos are available as VODs on YouTube if you don't want to do the live streaming or just want to watch it in your own pace. But this is kind of incredible opportunity to see how, you know, those really smart and amazing people work on complex things such as SpiderMonkey. So if that sounds interesting, absolutely do check it out. It's a really cool initiative in my opinion. Okay, next thing we got here is today I learned about the CSS property background repeat round, which is, I didn't even know that it exists, to be honest, but it looks really cool. It's essentially, it repeats the background without clipping it, either by rounding it or by spacing the images within the source div, which looks extremely handy. And it's just, one CSS property that looks really, really good. So if you're working with CSS, do check it out. Maybe this will help you at some point. I was trying to replicate the effect in the Apple Pay app, grid margin of improvement. Which effect are you talking about? I probably missed something. But anyway, yeah, so this thing exists, and apparently it's quite widely supported. So yeah, next time you do backgrounds in CSS, do remember about that. Anyway, continuing, we got a big announcement from Apple team. Essentially, the iOS 14 will ship the new WKWebView that will finally get a service worker support. This means that all third-party browsers such as Chrome, Firefox, or whatever else you can use on iOS that is technically a third-party browser but in reality uses the same web view, will finally get the damn service worker support. God damn it. It took too long. But there you go. There's actually quite a bunch of improvements to WebKit on iOS 14 that is coming this year. But yeah, it's quite exciting that we finally got a service worker support outside of the Safari. I'm still hoping that Apple at some point would just allow having custom engines, but I don't know if they will ever do that. But yeah, at least we get a service worker. Sharing as a sleeper. Okay. You should be able to share the full link. I don't think I've blocked anything or anything like that, unless the YouTube does this automatically. Come on, I just want... Doesn't... So I assume that is a GitHub link, right? GitHub.com/ There we go. Yep, that works. Okay, so I'll just put it and we'll check it out later once I get to the libraries and demos section. Anyway, that is a wrong link to close. Continuing, we got... Last thing here is the collection of the new things in Chrome DevTools for the version 85. That includes a thing that I never thought I would see in DevTools, CSS and JS support for style editing, which is kind of bonkers if you think about that, but yeah, that's the thing. Also Lighthouse 6, first meaningful paint deprecation, and a bunch of other things, including optional chaining, syntax auto-completion, which is super nice, private fields, and nullish coalescing operator, which is always great. So cannot wait for this to be shipped to the stable land. Apple, after many years, allowed people to change default apps. And yeah, I mean, not yet, but this is in the beta version. We're getting there. Maybe in like 5 years of time, Apple will finally allow, custom runtimes and things like this. But I won't hold my breath for that. Anyway, now we're coming to the releases section. The first release of the week is jspm.dev. This is a new CDN that replaces dev.jspm.io and is basically an improved version of that. It's a content delivery network that allows you to import any NPM package in your browser as ECMAScript module, or, obviously that will work in Deno or whatever other runtime that allows you to import ES modules. It's essentially... has a bunch of features such as, being super fast, optimizing code with broadly, minimizing the dependency waterfall, building all of NPM, package optimizations such as allowing you to import the specific features from packages, using the subpath detection as well as the new fancy exports fields we got in the package.json. So it seems pretty nice. So if you're using ES modules, make sure to check this one out. Probably will help you quite a bit. Next release we got here is React Query version 2.0 that includes better quality invalidation and refetching with less overfetching, simplified dependent query syntax and new idle query states, multiple instance polling and interval support, new query status booleans, and a bunch of other cool things, and prep for future SSR enhancements, which is pretty damn nice. So if you use it, make sure to check out the changes. There's quite a few of them are breaking, so you have to keep that in mind while upgrading. This is why it's major version. But yeah, looks really nice. I personally still haven't tried it, but I've heard a lot of good things about it, so maybe we should try it out at one of the live streams a bit later on. Okay, continuing, we got Cypress version 4.9. that brings the long-awaited experimental for now fetch polyfill. Yes, so this was one of the major pain points for us, at least when writing the end-to-end test with Cypress, is that it can intercept the XHR requests and basically listen for them and wait for them to finish, but it couldn't do that with fetch. And finally now, after 4.9 versions, we got the fetch polyfill that allows you to spy and stop on the fetch with, again, it's experimental for now, so it might break, might have some caveats, issues, and so on and so forth, so keep that in mind. But it's finally here, which is kind of awesome, and I should probably refactor some of our tests to use that instead of, well, just, doing random timeouts we're not doing timeouts anymore. I'm not that bad. Instead of waiting for the visual elements, essentially, which is, this should be better, basically. Right, continuing, we got version 10 of Angular, which comes with a whole bunch of things. Yeah, there's like, it now supports the new project scaffolding with strict TypeScript and type checking default budget reduced by 75%, which is just insane when you think about that, but there you go. Including the new versions of TypeScript, tslib, tslint, and stuff like this. Seems like most of that is like, incremental improvements, nothing really super major here from what I could tell. But yeah, looks quite nice. I don't know, like, it feels like the Angular is now only used in either really legacy platforms or by Google folks because it's a Google platform framework. But I'm not sure. Anyway, it's now version 10, so if you're using it, make sure to check it out and probably upgrade because it's usually a general, a good idea. Okay, anyway, continuing, we got TypeScript version 4.0 beta coming out. You can try it right now. The two major improvements that, the highlights for me, I guess, is the variadic tuple types, which are finally here, which means that you no longer need to define 2 million overrides for functions such as concat for arrays. And labeled tuple elements are also nice, and unknown uncatch clauses. So basically you can now finally define and say that, hey, the error is unknown, and then you can do some sort of a type checking to actually figure out what type it is, which is a nice addition. So it's basically the difference between unknown and any is that unknown tells you that, hey, you should probably do some type checking yourself here. So there's a bunch of other features, obviously, so do check it out. Speaking of TypeScript, I've been pondering lately, and I think I'm going to do a stream next week on trying to compare how good is the TypeScript in comparison to JS docs. So we're going to build a simple library in with JS docs typings, and we're going to build the same library with TypeScript, and then we're going to try to use it in projects and compare how it fares with, just TypeScript or just JS doc, and see how much of an improvement is essentially TypeScript typings in terms of developing using that library. I'm really curious about that, and it looks like I'm not the only one who was thinking about that because one of you guys submitted a proposal for this, so I'm really kind of excited to see that you are also interested in that, so we're going to check this out next week. All right, now we're coming to the libs and demos. We got just 5 of them here, and then the 6th one that was shared by Marco. And the first one we got here is Ignite. This is the command line for scaffolding React Native apps that also includes boilerplates, plugins, generators, and a bunch of other things. So essentially, if you, for whatever reason, do not want to use Expo, but actually want a bunch of other features, do check this one out. It actually looks pretty nice. So it has like a ton of different things. Maybe this is what you were looking for. I just use Flow with comments type checked. I tried Flow quite some time ago, but it was so damn slow, I just dropped it immediately. Like, I haven't tried it in ages, but maybe it's better now. But from what I've heard, the Facebook guys was saying that they're basically deprecating it in favor of the TypeScript. Wasn't that the case? Did they decided to not deprecate it? Hey, Dr. Pepper, welcome to the stream. Okay, next thing we got here is next-auth.js, authentication solution for Next.js and serverless. A really nice looking authentication middleware for Next.js that has a ton of providers, including the basic credentials, magic email links, Facebook, GitHub, whatever you can imagine, everything is here. Super easy to set up, super easy to configure with Next.js, and looks really damn nice. So if you're working with Next and wanted an authentication solution that basically has everything you want and works with SSR, do check this one out. It is really, really cool. I also should start it because I completely forgot about that, because it's a damn nice one, and I'll probably use it next time we're building something so that I don't have to set up the authentication myself, essentially. Right, next thing we got here is cloudgate. So this thing which featured on Hacker News a couple of times, if I remember correctly, is this sort of fast, as it says, a fast multi-threaded web application server for Node.js that is supposedly handles a ton of requests in some way. And I was curious as to, how exactly that works. Well, it turns out it's basically just using the worker threads to do that. And yes, it seems pretty fast, but from what I've seen from the source code, the development experience is not that nice. So I'm not sure if you would want to use that. I guess if you want to scale to cores rather than to machines, this probably is a nice way of doing it. But again, I would probably personally take Fastify over that. But if you are working on a very constrained resources, you have only one server that has a lot of cores, and you need to scale Node app to it, it does give you some pretty insane requests per second per core, like up to 185K. I assume this is in the very basic case when you don't have to actually do any significant load. But yeah, it looks interesting. Just, keep in mind that it's a pretty rough project, at least for now, and the dev API are not as nice as they could have been, basically. What do you think about BlizJS? Isn't that, I think I've seen that at one point somewhere already. Full stack. Oh yeah. I haven't tried it. Like, I remember seeing it somewhere, but I have not tried it at all, so I cannot really tell you anything about that. Is it? Oh yeah, it uses Prisma, right? I did not like Prisma at all. So if this thing uses Prisma, then I would probably not like it as well, because Prisma is not that nice to work with, at least from my, initial experience. So I would prefer just plain Next.js with something like Hasura on the backend, or custom backend with Fastify and I don't know, GraphQL Compose or whatever. Anyway, continuing, we got Levo framework. So this is a server-side rendering with Elm architecture in Deno. So this is, I think, probably one of the first Deno frameworks I've seen out there. That's, well, first of all, it's a full-on framework for Deno that allows you to do React server-side rendered apps. And yeah, it's basically that. It looks pretty nice. Has a bunch of things. Supports pretty much what you would expect out of a server-side rendered framework. JSX support and everything runs on Deno. Don't know what more else to say here. The docs could be a bit better, I guess. But, this is like first release here, so make sure to keep that in mind. Obviously going to be improved over time. Looks interesting, so do check it out if that sounds interesting to you. Okay, next thing we got here is patch package. Now this is a thing that I would advise against using, right? But there are cases when you absolutely have to do this and there's no way around that, and this is like the easiest approach. And in this case, this package might be extremely helpful. So this is a patch package, and essentially it allows you to create patches for your node modules and apply them on post-install step. The idea is modules then go in there with your editor, edit the node module, and then run npx patch package node module name. And it will generate this patch for it that will be then applied post-install when you run the patch package in your repo that will basically automatically patch your dependency to do whatever you want. Monkey patching is not a very good idea, and generally it's better to, like, if it's a bug, then you submit a pull request with a fix. If it's a major change, then you fork it and maintain it yourself. But there are cases where, it's a valid approach to just, do a small monkey patch and forget about it, especially if you are using something that is, I don't know, very outdated. But then again, probably forking it would be easier. But anyway, there are cases for using something like this, so keep in mind that this exists, basically. Right, and the last library we got here is React Gradient from Marco here, and it is an Apple Pay-like static gradient generator. There is an example. There we go. That is always nice to see. I probably need to unblock my JavaScript. React gradients. And I mean, it looks nice. I'm assuming this is going to look a lot better if we do something like phone. Yeah, I like it obvious, you know, the Apple Pay typically is shown on a smaller card, so you know this kind of gradients look better when you have a constrained space. Maybe the demo could do that as well. At least that's what I would do, because it doesn't look as impressive on a larger area of such a large screen, rather than a tiny card that, you know, has condensed items in it. But anyway, that's pretty cool. Okay, that's it from my side. If you have any questions or suggestions, do feel free to throw them into the chat right now. If not, as usual, you can find all the links in the GitHub or on BxJS.dev after it updates. You can join our Discord to chat about JavaScript or video games. You can follow me on Twitter for random shitposting, basically. There is a Telegram channel where I collect unfiltered links that some of them don't make it into the podcast. Well, lately, all of them, I think almost all of them have been making it in the podcast, because there's not that many of them lately. But yeah, that's basically it. Redwood.js. Redwood.js is, I think I've heard about that as well. Bringing full stack to Jamstack. What is it about? Jamstack CDN. So Redwood codebase, API, backend, frontend, Webpack and Jamstack build, GraphQL endpoint, custom. Okay, that diagram doesn't explain anything. So how does it work? I think I've heard about it somewhere. Maybe it was even featured at some point in the BxJS Weekly, but I don't remember. Like, I haven't tried it for sure, so I cannot really say. Okay, there we go. There's a stack. React, GraphQL, and Apollo. Apollo is pretty nice. Prisma, again, definitely no from my side. Jest is super nice. Storybook is great. Babel, Webpack, that's also nice. What do you think about this? About what, Mark? But yeah, anyway, so it's like Prisma for me, again, I say, you know, as I said, I did not, like, my first experience with it was not nice. I like the idea of auto-completion for the database clients, but the way it was implemented at Prisma just feels really weird, especially this whole idea that you generate your schema off a database. Like, it's just strange. And yeah, it's like, there's some caveats here. But yeah, so can you see the link? No, I cannot see the link. Okay, looks like the YouTube does cut the links out. Wait a second. And it doesn't seem like there's any settings I can change here. Are you, Mark, are you in the Discord? If you are in the Discord, you can just share it there and I can have a look at it. I cannot see the link. Seems like the YouTube is trimming it down. Can you maybe write the name of the thing so I can just Google it and find the link myself, basically? Yeah, so it seems like the YouTube is just basically cutting out the links. God damn it, YouTube. Why do you have to be like this? Okay, I'll give you a couple of seconds to think about the name of the link or whatever you wanted me to check out. Again, if you guys have any questions, suggestions, or want to share your projects, feel free to throw them into the chat. And let's rewrite TypeScript in Rust. Okay. Right, is the name of the article. So I assume it's this one. Okay. Blah, 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 rah, rah, rah. I mean, this, so every time I see stuff like this, it's like, yes, I get it. This is confusing at first, but this is per spec. Like, it's literally described in a language, and you should never use things like you should never have things like this in your code, right? It's like, come on. This is like nitpicking at this point. TypeScript bottleneck, SWC is a compiler. Oh yeah, is it just talking about SWC, which is the TypeScript JavaScript compiler? Hey Kepler, welcome to the stream. Regards from Markisha. Regards from my, well, I would say office, but I also play video games here, so it's like my computer room, I guess. Okay, so this article essentially talks about SWC, which is a TypeScript / JavaScript compiler, but the thing is that it doesn't address this problem, right? It's like, it's not even a problem, because if it's a JavaScript TypeScript compiler, it's going to work in exactly the same way as JavaScript spec says, right? Which means that this is gonna work in exactly the same way in SWC2. I think I do like the idea of having a super fast TypeScript, JavaScript compiler, or I guess toolchain. And like, I'm not sure. So the question is, how much harder will it be to write something like this in Rust rather than JavaScript? And how much of an improvement in terms of speed will we get in the long run? It also comes down to that. It's really cool if we could get something like Babel, but it would be written in Rust and would be like, I don't know, 100 times faster, right? But it's probably not realistic. Like, Babel is an extremely complicated thing, and reproducing something like this with the same amount of flexibility in Rust is probably going to be really damn hard. Building a TypeScript compiler in Rust, on the other hand, is probably a lot more approachable because TypeScript is a very strict subset and doesn't really need any extensions, doesn't need any plugins or whatever, right? So it's like you just build one compiler and you're good. So this sounds like a better way to do that, at least to me. Maybe I'm missing something here. But I do like the idea. Again, and even now comparing this to Babel, it's like, what is it, 10, 20 times faster, which is already impressive. But I would be interested to see where this whole project goes. This is kind of my thoughts on it. Hey, Javi, welcome to the stream. There are so many bugs in Linux kernel that aren't supported. Knowingly fixed will break so many devices, hence it's a feature. That's a pretty common thing, right? So like, I think Apple Apple is basically the only one who just go, fuck it, let's just do everything non-backwards compatible and break all the previous software that worked fine and drop the 32-bit support, for example. If you take Windows, right, a lot of people complain that, hey, there's things that are still broken, there's windows that look different, there are commands that work differently if you execute them with a different, I don't know, .exe or whatever. There's a lot of things like this, but they are there because Windows 10 is still backwards compatible with Windows, I don't know, 95, probably Windows 3.11 as well. And this is like, when you think about it, it's mind-blowing. So Windows has been backwards compatible with one of the first versions still, and you can still take the software that was working on Windows 95 or whatever, and it will work without any problem in Windows 10, which is just mind-blowing. On the other hand, Apple is just like, fuck it, we'll just drop everything and break backwards compatibility. And now they're doing the ARM switch, which is kind of an intriguing move. But then again, I'm surprised they actually offered the virtualization solution to run existing apps on ARM machine, because I fully expected them to be like, we're introducing this new ARM computers and they won't run any old software. That would be a very Apple move. So Linux, it's great that they are doing this, in my opinion, because that means that you can be sure that even if you pick up the old software, it will still not break if you run it on a newer Linux kernel or Linux distribution, right? So long as your dependencies are in order, basically. Without the hashtag, YouTube even blocks the written out links. Okay, I mean, I'm assuming the Google has a pretty good system to, figure out links and spam, but the fact that they just block everything is a bit silly. Like, come on, I want to see some links from people watching this. Let me try to see if there's settings, live chat, enable live chat, replay slow mode, community settings. There we go. I'm gonna try to see if there is any way, automated filter. So there's a restream. Okay, so this is the moderator, approved users, block. I don't even have the block links enabled here. So yeah, this is definitely something. Hold potentially inappropriate comments for review. Okay, so theoretically it should only hold them for review and show me basically to approve or cancel. But YouTube being YouTube as usual, the whole thing doesn't work as expected. So there you go. Hey everyone, welcome to the stream. Yes, I mean, we're nearly wrapping up, but I can just sit and chat for a bit more. And anyway, if you guys have any questions you want to ask me, or any other things you want me to check out, or anything you want to chat about, because again, we had an extremely tiny episode, I'm up for just sitting and chatting here. If you have any other questions you want to ask me about technology, about JavaScript, about, I don't know, tooling, about things, do feel free to throw them into the chat. if not, I guess we can just as well wrap it up here and go do something else. Maybe I'll actually picked up the Satisfactory on Steam. So maybe we'll do a live stream a bit later, and I'll just do some factory construction streaming, if you're into this, of course. So for some reason, I'm quite excited about 3D Factorio, but we're gonna see how that goes. I'm usually terrible at games like this. Right, well, gave you a couple of minutes. Doesn't seem like there's any more questions or suggestions, so thank you guys very much for watching. As usual, you can find all the links on GitHub or BxJS.dev, as I've said. VOD available immediately on YouTube or Twitch. Oh yeah, I dropped the Mixer streaming because apparently they're closing the Mixer after like a few years of, well, not growing really well. That's a bit sad because technically the Mixer was probably the most, like the nicest streaming platform really out there. Yeah, apparently they couldn't grow it fast enough, but there we go. Yeah, that's basically it from my side. So thank you guys very much for watching. Thank you for your continued support. Hope you have an awesome rest of the weekend or rest of the week if you're watching the VOD of this. And I see you on Wednesday for the BxJS livestream comparing TypeScript and JS doc-based projects. Maybe we'll throw in Flow in there just to see how that works out. So there we go. Yeah, that's it from my side. See you guys later. Bye.